They didn't recognize him. Not the staff, not the security, not even the manager who recited the company motto like scripture. To them, he was just an old man in a worn coat, lingering too long near the expensive jackets. But what they didn't know, what none of them saw coming, was that the man they tried to escort out, built the place they were standing in. And in less than 5 minutes, he would change everything. The security footage starts mid-frame, static hum, grayscale. A man is being held at the threshold of a boutique entrance, one hand on his chest, the other calmly at his side. No struggle, no raised voice. Just a quiet man in a weathered coat, standing still while a younger guard blocks him from entering. The timestamp flickers. Then the voice, "Sir, this section is for clients with an appointment." Especially dressed like that. 1 hour earlier, the rain had just started to taper off over Midtown Manhattan. It didn't fall, it lingered. Hung in the air like hesitation. Under the awning of Layton & Company's flagship store, a man wiped his boots on the mat. His trench coat was wet at the cuffs, and the shoulders sagged with weight, age or weather, it wasn't clear. Denzel Washington stepped inside without announcement. He didn't wait to be greeted. He didn't expect to be. The boutique glowed with curated elegance, walnut floors polished like glass, ambient jazz notes sliding down from recessed ceiling speakers, air laced with cedarwood and confidence. Near the register, a blonde woman glanced up. Her name tag read Sloane Mercer, though the sharpness in her eyes didn't need an introduction. She noticed him. Not recognized, noticed. She didn't move immediately. Just tilted her head slightly, assessing. No designer watch, no assistant, no visible wealth, no reason to matter. She tapped something under the counter. At that exact moment, Denzel was running his fingers along the outer hem of a charcoal blazer near the far wall. The stitching felt familiar. Almost personal. He remembered approving the wool sample in a design review 3 fiscal quarters ago. No one had told him the cut had changed. Sloane stepped out from behind the counter, each heel click deliberate. She crossed her arms mid-chest. "Sir," she said, voice crisp. "This floor is for private clients. Do you have an appointment today?" Denzel didn't look away from the blazer. "No," he said softly. "Just browsing." A beat. She smiled. But not with her eyes. Of course. Behind her, a subtle nod triggered movement. A man in a navy overcoat drifted out from a corner near the dressing rooms. Tall, clean-shaven, earpiece half-tucked, plainclothes security. He began orbiting. Denzel noticed. He noticed everything. He walked farther in. Past displays of folded trousers and leather gloves. Past a glass case featuring limited edition cufflinks, half of which he'd sourced himself from a workshop in Florence. A young white couple laughed quietly over matching scarves. A sales associate offered them espresso. Denzel lingered by the belt rack. He touched one of the buckles. The movement caught Sloane's eye. She closed the distance faster this time. "Please don't handle those unless you're ready to purchase," she said with manufactured politeness. "Limited stock." He turned toward her. His face didn't shift. His hands didn't rise. Only the smallest tilt of his head, an unspoken "really?" He set the belt down gently. Noted. She didn't leave. Behind the counter, a younger staffer, Kendra, whispered something low. Denzel didn't need to strain. "He's been circling the jewelry section. Should we call someone?" He blinked once. Then stepped away from the belts, toward a nearby mannequin display. His shoulders remained even. His breath steady. He wasn't here to escalate. He was here to observe. To measure how much of the place still resembled what he built. A framed mission statement hung near the entrance. "Treat every guest like family." He'd written that line himself. 6 years ago. Travis, the security guard, moved again. He wasn't circling now. He was hovering. From behind the front desk, Sloane called out across the floor. "Sir?" Her voice sharpened slightly. "If you're not intending to make a purchase, we'll need you to leave." "Store policy." Denzel didn't react. Not with his face. But inside, something quiet twisted, an echo of a moment from decades ago. A night when he was asked to leave a jazz club he'd already paid to enter. Or the first time he walked into a theater and was told the dressing room was for actors only. He took a final glance around. The place was beautiful. He had made sure of it. And now it was performing a ritual he recognized all too well. They didn't know who he was. But they had decided who he wasn't. Denzel looked toward Sloane. She was waiting for an answer, arms folded like a verdict. He took a calm step forward. His voice low, steady. "You don't need to call anyone," he said. "They'll be here soon enough." The rain had stopped outside, but inside, the storm was just beginning. Not the kind with thunder and fury, but the quiet kind. The kind you only notice when you realize you're the only one getting wet. Denzel moved past a shelf of silk ties, letting his fingers brush one gently. The fabric felt cheap. It wasn't supposed to. Not this line. The supplier must have changed something, cut corners. He'd remember to flag that later. But right now, all eyes were on him. From behind a sunglasses display, Travis adjusted his stance. Not close enough to touch. Just close enough to be felt. Near the corner, a boy, maybe 19, dressed in designer sneakers and a fitted hoodie, walked in, black, confident, but trying not to look like he was trying. Denzel watched as the front desk paused for half a second. A ripple, invisible to most, but not to him. The greeter didn't move. The welcome smile never came. Instead, one of the staff subtly tapped her headset and murmured something. Protocol. That's all it was now. Denzel inhaled slowly and turned down the narrow corridor lined with wool overcoats. The lighting here was warmer, softer. Intentional. Years ago, he'd insisted that the winterwear section feel like safety. He remembered saying those exact words. Like safety. He paused in front of a coat, navy, hand-stitched, horn buttons. The same coat he'd helped design. Except the shoulders were too narrow. European cut. He hadn't signed off on that. He ran his hand across the fabric. The weight was wrong, too. Behind him, Sloane's heels clicked in. She stayed just far enough to avoid confrontation, just close enough to assert control. "Sir," she said again, her tone tighter now. "You've been in the store for a while. If you need assistance." Denzel turned slowly. "I don't," he said. Sloane's mouth flattened. She gestured toward the coat. "Company policy requires ID verification for purchases over $2,000. I'm not at the register." "No, but you're lingering near high-value items." There it was. Lingering. He took a step back, giving the coat its space, as if to reassure her it was safe from him. Behind Sloane, young Kendra whispered again. "He keeps touching the rings." That's the third time. He wasn't near the rings. He hadn't been. But the story had already formed. Denzel looked up toward the small camera in the corner ceiling, blinking red. Recording everything. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "I used to visit shops like this with my mother," he said. Sloane blinked. "Excuse me?" She liked to take her time. Feel every thread. Didn't always buy. But she believed dignity meant you didn't have to explain yourself just to be there. Sloane said nothing. "She once got followed through a store for 30 minutes, Denzel continued, because her purse was too nice for the outfit she wore. They thought she'd stolen it. The purse was hers. The store wasn't. Sloane shifted, clearly uncomfortable. I was 10, he added. I didn't understand then. I do now. She didn't apologize. She didn't move. Instead, Travis took a few steps closer. This time, not pretending to browse. Not hovering. Standing. Watching. Denzel glanced at the coat again, the one he used to believe symbolized excellence. Now it was just fabric. He turned to walk back toward the front. Past the espresso tray. Past the framed mission statement he no longer recognized. By the time he reached the display table near the register, his expression hadn't changed. But something inside had. They weren't trying to humiliate him. They were simply doing what the system taught them. And that was worse. Because he had helped build that system. He looked at Sloane one more time. She opened her mouth, maybe to say something polite, maybe to excuse everything away. But he beat her to it. I'm going to make a purchase, he said calmly. She tilted her head. Are you sure? He gave a small nod. Not for me, he added. For the mirror. Sloane's brow furrowed. He reached for the gray blazer and walked toward the counter. Travis followed. So did the silence. The counter was empty when Denzel approached. Just glass, polished wood, and the quiet weight of assumptions. He laid the gray blazer down gently, smoothing the sleeve like it mattered. He didn't look up. Didn't need to. Sloane arrived a second later, arms folded across her chest, expression unreadable. You'd like to purchase this? I would, Denzel replied, voice steady. She glanced down at the tag. Her eyes flickered. Are you aware of the price? I am. She hesitated, then slowly reached for the point-of-sale tablet. For anything over 2,000, we'll need ID verification, she said, rehearsed. Denzel pulled out a worn black wallet and retrieved a single card, black metal, no visible limit, heavy even to look at. The kind of card few ever see in person. Sloane took it from his hand like it might break. She turned it over, inspecting it slowly, her brow twitching. This is a high-tier card. He said nothing. She slid it into the reader. One beep. A pause. Declined. The word blinked across the screen like a challenge. She didn't hide her smirk. I'll try again, she said lightly. She removed and reinserted it. Beep. Declined. Travis was suddenly closer. Not browsing. Not pretending. Just standing there. Sloane's voice lifted ever so slightly. Sir, your card isn't going through. Is this actually your account? Denzel didn't blink. It's a fraud lock. I just flew in from Nairobi. Sloane leaned back a little. Of course, she said, in that way people say when they don't believe you. Would you like to call your bank? I can, he said. But it won't be necessary. I think it will be, she replied, already glancing at Travis. Security, she added, louder this time, though not looking at either of them directly. Travis took a step forward. Not aggressive, not loud. Just enough. Is there a problem here? This gentleman's card failed. Twice, Sloane explained, her tone flattening into policy. And he's been browsing for some time. Denzel looked up at Travis, then at Sloane. Calm as ever. I'm telling you now, he said softly, there's no fraud. We've had fake cards before, Sloane said to no one in particular. It's not uncommon. I understand. We just need to verify some things. I'm sure. She glanced toward the door. In the meantime, perhaps you could step outside? That was it. The moment broke. The humiliation wasn't subtle anymore. It was spelled out, labeled, delivered with a smile. 2 other customers had paused by the scarf wall, eyes flicking in his direction. One held up a phone, casually angled. Kendra, the junior staffer, stiffened behind the jewelry case. A cashier nearby stopped mid-transaction, hovering near the register as if unsure which way the wind would blow. Denzel exhaled slowly. And then he smiled. Not forced. Not polite. Knowing. Because he understood now. This wasn't a mistake. It was a mirror. And they were about to see exactly what was being reflected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. Tapped one contact. "This is Denzel," he said calmly into the mic. "Patch me through to Layton HQ, tell them I'm at store 1. Sloane's face shifted, confused, then, something else. Not fear. Not yet. But the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going the way she thought. Travis stepped back half an inch, uncertain. "It's urgent," Denzel added. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. He never raised his voice. Never explained where he was. He didn't need to. The internal system had already recognized the device, pinged the location, flagged the situation. He returned the phone to his pocket. Then waited. He didn't say another word. He didn't need to. They had all spoken more than enough. The front doors opened with a soft click. Not rushed. Not loud. Just 2 silhouettes in black coats stepping inside like they'd done it 1,000 times before. One held a tablet, the other wore a lanyard with a chrome badge that caught the light. Regional Executive, Lauren Patel. Every sound in the store seemed to hush. The background jazz faded beneath the weight of the silence. Lauren's eyes scanned the space, sharp and focused. Then she saw him. Her breath caught. "Mr. Washington," she said, crossing the floor quickly. Her voice, once formal, cracked with recognition. "We weren't informed you'd be visiting today." Sloane froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Denzel didn't move. He simply looked down at the gray blazer still resting on the counter, then back at Sloane. "I tried to buy this," he said quietly. "They assumed I couldn't." Lauren's jaw tightened. She turned to Sloane. "You didn't recognize?" "No one informed us of any visit," Sloane cut in, defensive, eyes darting toward Travis. Denzel held her gaze. "You don't need to be informed," he said softly. "To treat someone like a human being." The sentence didn't need to be raised to land. It cut clean, all the same. Lauren stepped back, eyes hardening, lips pressing together. "Would you like to take this to the office?" she asked. "No," Denzel said. "I'd like to speak to your entire team." "Here. Right here. On the floor." Sloane flinched. "With respect, Mr. Washington, that's highly unusual." Denzel tilted his head slightly. "What's unusual," he said, "is being treated like a threat in a place I helped build." Lauren nodded without a word. She moved to the register, picked up the store mic, and pressed the announcement button. Her voice echoed through the boutique, calm but sharp. "Attention all team members. Please report to the front floor immediately for an emergency briefing." The sound carried through dressing rooms, stockrooms, break rooms. And then they began to appear. One by one. From behind mirrored doors, from storage, from side aisles, staff in varying states of confusion and caution. Kendra emerged, shoulders tense. A cashier abandoned their tablet mid-checkout. Travis retreated a step but didn't leave. They all gathered beneath the central skylight, forming a slow, uneven semicircle. Customers lingered nearby, curious now. Not just at the scene, but at the man standing at the center of it, quiet, hands folded, blazer still untouched. Denzel looked at them. Not with anger. Something colder. Disappointment. I walked in here today, he began, his voice even, as a customer. No one moved. And I was treated like a liability. A problem to be removed. He let that hang in the air. His eyes found Sloane's. And the worst part is, none of you stopped it. No one looked at him directly. The store still smelled of leather and bergamot. But under it now was something else. Shame. He stepped forward once, slowly. This isn't about a jacket, he continued. It's not about a credit card, or an appointment. It's about how easily we decide who matters, and who doesn't. His voice never wavered. And it's about a culture that allowed it to feel normal. He paused. Then added, just loud enough to carry. And if you think this ends with a refund and an apology, think again. The room remained still. He stood in the center, not performing. Just present. And suddenly, no one remembered the music playing. Only the silence. Denzel let the silence stretch until it wasn't just quiet, it was accountability. 12 employees stood before him now. Some with their hands behind their backs. Others clasped nervously in front. No one spoke. No one shifted. Even Travis, who had loomed all afternoon, now stood at a distance, arms slack at his sides. Denzel's gaze moved slowly across the room. Not scanning. Seeing. I didn't walk in here today as a celebrity, he said. Not as a co-owner. Not as a name on a plaque. I walked in wearing a hoodie and a worn-out coat. No entourage. No appointment. And that was enough for all of you to decide who I must be. A single throat cleared from the back. Someone looked down. Let's be clear, Denzel continued. You didn't break any laws. You didn't raise your voices. You didn't put hands on me. He stepped forward. But you performed something older than all of us. You performed exclusion. And you did it with a smile. He turned slightly, gesturing to the walls, the warm lights, the curated displays. This store was designed to feel welcoming. That was the promise. I sat in the room when we wrote that slogan. He pointed toward the glass entrance, where a sign still hung in gold lettering, treat every guest like family. I wrote that. His voice dipped lower. My mother was the kind of woman who walked into stores like this and got followed. You didn't need to see the whole purse to decide it wasn't hers. Just her shoes. Her posture. Her skin. Sloane blinked, her arms still folded across her chest, but not as tightly now. She was once asked to step outside while they checked a return receipt. Even though she had just bought the item 5 minutes earlier. I remember watching her stand on the sidewalk. Shoulders back. Eyes wet. Denzel turned to Kendra. She looked about your age. Kendra's eyes dropped instantly. I was 10, he said softly. That was the day I learned the difference between walking in and being allowed to stay. He took one small step closer to the team. You didn't invent this culture, he said. But you upheld it. And when you had a chance to do something different, you chose the script. A few employees shifted. Travis's jaw flexed. And I know, Denzel added, some of you were just doing your jobs. Watching behavior. Enforcing policy. Staying professional. He paused. But I need you to hear this. Policy without humanity is just performance. His eyes returned to Sloane. You looked at me, and you didn't see a client. You didn't see a man who could have built this place. You saw a problem. And that should scare you. Sloane opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just a breath that didn't want to become a word. I'm not angry, Denzel said. I'm not here to humiliate you. But I am here to change this. And that starts with truth. He looked at the entire group. You may not remember this moment forever. But you'll remember how it felt when the room stopped pretending. Then he turned to Sloane again. You're not being fired, he said plainly. But starting Monday, you'll begin a 6-week rotation with our Community Outreach Division. You'll serve veterans, refugee families, and teens on government housing vouchers. You'll help redesign our service protocols with them, not for them. Sloane's mouth fell slightly open. You're serious. Deadly. He looked at Travis. And you? Travis straightened. I was doing my job. No, Denzel said. Your job is to make people feel safe. Not just the people who look like your idea of comfort. Travis didn't respond. Denzel nodded once. Starting next week, you'll shadow our accessibility team. You'll listen to customers who've been profiled, ignored, or pushed aside. You'll hear their stories. And then you'll help rewrite our policy, with them at the table. He looked back to the team. This place doesn't need better training manuals. It needs better mirrors. And today, this was one. No one clapped. No one spoke. But something shifted. Not a reset. A reckoning. 2 months passed. The city changed coats. The wind traded rain for sun. But inside Layton and Company, the air was still as precise as ever, soft lighting, subtle scent, polished floors you could see your breath in. Denzel entered quietly. No announcement. No entourage. No camera crew waiting outside the doors. Just him, in a plain black t-shirt, jeans worn at the knees, and a baseball cap pulled low. No one stopped him. No one paused. A young man at the front gave a polite nod. Welcome in, he said easily. Let me know if you need anything. Denzel returned the nod. Just browsing. He drifted into the menswear section, fingers brushing new displays. Lighter fabric. Broader sizing. That had been his suggestion. Someone had followed through. Near the back, he spotted her. Sloane. Her hair tied back now, uniform a muted gray. A small, training lead pin on her chest, nothing flashy, just enough to say she stayed. She was with a teenage boy, tall, awkward, uncomfortable in his own skin. His mother hovered nearby, clutching her purse tightly, speaking softly in Spanish. I know it's for an interview, Sloane said kindly. Let's look at something with a little personality, just enough to stand out, but still clean. The boy nodded, nervously. What's your budget range? Sloane asked, not assuming, not judging. The mother answered in a whisper. Sloane didn't blink. Perfect, she said. We'll make it work. She offered 3 options, explained the differences, even demonstrated how one jacket could be adjusted later. Denzel watched. The boy's shoulders relaxed. The mother's hands unclenched. A few feet away, Kendra stood folding scarves, now wearing a badge that read, Community Liaison. She caught sight of Denzel, gave a quiet nod, then returned to her task. She didn't come running. She didn't pose. She just worked. Denzel had read the reports. Kendra had volunteered for the local outreach shift every week for the last month. She'd rewritten sections of the training manual herself. Even Travis was still there. No longer by the door like a wall. He was crouched beside an older black gentleman, helping him navigate the digital gift card system on a small tablet. Take your time, he said gently. It'll prompt you when you're ready. His voice was lower now. Measured. Human. Denzel let it all wash over him. The way the staff moved. The way they listened. The way no one rushed or scanned or second-guessed. This wasn't perfection. But it was progress. He approached the counter slowly. Sloane saw him and came over, not nervous, not defensive, just present. "Mr. Washington," she said, voice steady. "Welcome back." He raised an eyebrow. "How's it going?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "We're learning," she said. "Unlearning too." He nodded. "That's the harder part." Sloane gave a faint smile. "But it's happening," she said. "One customer at a time." Denzel turned slightly, gazing toward the far end of the store. A teenager had just walked in, hoodie, earbuds in, eyes wide but alert. Two employees approached from opposite sides, calm and friendly. One smiled. "Let us know if you need anything," she said. "Sneakers are on sale in the back." The boy gave a small nod and kept moving. No suspicion. No pause. Just presence. Denzel watched it happen. The kind of moment that would have collapsed months ago. Now, it held. He exhaled, long and slow. Not satisfaction. Not pride. Just relief. Then he turned toward the exit. And left without a word. The press conference wasn't flashy. No spotlight. No stage rigging. No velvet rope or curated playlist humming behind him. Just a plain white banner, stretched across the storefront of Layton & Company's flagship location in Manhattan. 3 words printed in bold, black type, the Dignity Code. Denzel stood behind a modest podium, dressed the way he always did, black slacks, worn blazer, boots that had seen better floors than this one. Before him was a quiet crowd, retail executives, community leaders, students, former customers, a few reporters with notepads open, not phones raised. No one was here for a soundbite. Denzel looked out, not at any one face, but through them. Past them. As if this was a message meant to echo further than just this block. 2 months ago, he began, I walked into this store. His voice was steady. Deeper than microphones were used to. I didn't wear a name tag. I didn't announce who I was. I didn't bring a team. I didn't expect recognition. I came in wearing a hoodie and a coat I've had for 10 years. He paused. And I was treated like a stranger. No violence. No shouting. Just, quietly removed. Efficiently dismissed. Cameras clicked softly. Some people called it profiling. Some called it a misunderstanding. But I don't need labels. What happened that day wasn't rare. That's the problem. He stepped away from the podium for a moment, walking slowly in front of the banner. This store wasn't built for exclusivity. It was built for access. That was the dream. And somewhere between profit margins and curated aesthetics, we forgot. He turned to the crowd. The Dignity Code isn't a slogan. It's not a rebranding. It's a reckoning. He gestured to the 3 pillars printed beneath the banner. Pillar 1, face forward. A mandatory training program rooted not in policy, but in presence. Every employee, every store. Not just how to serve, but how to see. Pillar 2, the second window. A hiring initiative focused on individuals often overlooked, formerly incarcerated citizens, veterans, those recovering from housing insecurity. Not just hired, but mentored, tracked, and elevated. And Pillar 3, the Reeves-Patterson Fellowship. He paused there. Named for my mother, Lennis Reeves, and for the high school teacher who gave me my first recommendation letter. A few in the crowd lowered their eyes respectfully. The fellowship will fund students of color studying retail ethics, inclusive design, and business leadership. Because if we want better institutions, we start with better roots. He walked back to the podium. Some people asked me why I didn't sue. Why I didn't fire anyone. Why I didn't go viral. He let the quiet settle. Because this wasn't about punishment. It was about possibility. This was never a scandal. It was a mirror. And I saw something I helped build. And I didn't like what was looking back. Near the edge of the crowd, Sloane stood, not in uniform. No speaking role. Just there. Watching. Behind her, Kendra helped a young intern hold the press mic steady. Even Travis was in attendance. No longer crossing his arms. Just folding them gently, respectfully. Denzel adjusted the mic one final time. We all make mistakes, he said. But dignity is the choice to grow from them. He looked down. Dignity is policy, backed by heart. He looked up again, letting the words find their mark. Dignity is free to give, but priceless when it's taken. He stepped away. No music played. No thunderous applause. Just a quiet ripple of nods. Of people who understood now what they hadn't before. In the weeks that followed, the Face Forward program launched in 7 pilot stores. Within 2 months, it expanded to 50. By the end of the year, over 100 retail locations across the country had adopted the dignity standard. Denzel never returned to the media to boast. He didn't need to. Because he hadn't left a headline behind. He'd left something better. A place where the welcome isn't earned by how you look. It's offered because you walked through the door.